Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pregame Network podcast. This is episode 44. I'm your gracious host, Dan, joined by my bestest pal, Anthony. Going to
Holy.
talk about some video games. So, yeah, let's just jump right into it.
Yeah.
How about you go first this week with the what you've been playing?
Um,
'Cause I,
so
I
I'm
always go first.
yeah, that's fine. So I've been playing pretty much the usual. Just getting all that stuff done. The only things that are different, I recently played a little bit of N plus plus.
Oh,
If you
really?
remember N
That's an old
plus,
one.
yeah. Well, no, we played N plus. N plus plus. I mean, N plus plus is still kind of old, but it's the sequel to what we used to play on the 360.
Right.
I've put it off for a while just because the unfortunate thing is when it launched, they basically said to everybody involved, they're like, hey, we have the budget to either do online multiplayer or sharing creative maps, and the creative maps is what I used to love about M plus.
Yeah,
And
you
unfortunately,
were a sick fuck with those maps, just by
oh
the way.
boy, oh boy, I was. I'm gonna be doing that again because
Oh,
me,
no.
Nick, Luke, and Harrison, we played a little bit and we seem to enjoy it. So I want to do a full playthrough of that, and then if we get through that, I'll end up doing a like we'll do challenge maps and shit like that. But yeah, so I played a little bit of that, but yeah, I never got to it before because they chose the online multiplayer aspect and not the created map aspect. So when it
Mhm.
was new, I was younger and I was still very much into that, and that kind of put me off from doing it. So I'm like, all right. But now we finally played a little bit of it. Um, that being said, other than that, um, I've said for weeks now, I'm just like, I have a whole list. The second I get some free time, I'm going to go through it. And I immediately went and hit something that was not on the list. And I went in and I spent my precious free time during the week playing Avowed.
Oh, really? How did
Yes.
that go?
So,
But
I
before you tell me,
yes.
what I have been hearing is
Mhm.
like very like okay to good reviews.
Yes.
Nothing on
Uh,
and nothing crazy on either end of the spectrum.
yes. So, it's definitely a game that has been. I'll put it this way. I think it would be a pretty niche title.
Okay.
Something that like certain people would, pick up and play, almost like a Bethesda game, where it's just like if it's not a massive hit like Skyrim, and it's just like a side thing Starfield, like you'll have people who are very happy to have it, but it won't reach critical acclaim, right?
Hmm.
Um, Avowed would be that if it weren't for that art director snafu a couple months ago, where he was saying specifically he
Yeah.
put pronouns in the game to piss people off, or that's the kind of thing that he would want. And because of that, it's been thrust into the forefront, and it's under a level of scrutiny and praise that it does not deserve. Basically, what I mean by that is like people are scrutinizing every single thing about it, and I don't think that's fair. And at the same time, it's not like a 10 out of 10 like some people are saying. I from what I've played, obviously I haven't beaten it. It's a very lengthy game, one way or the other. From what I've played, a couple things stuck out to me. The environments are very nice to look at. They're they're
Okay.
varied. They're nice looking. Even though the characters leave a bit to be desired as far as appealing to look at, and appealing doesn't mean like attractive. I just mean like not mush to look at, right? The characters all have that kind of issue that is cropped up with AAA games where it's like cloth bags of meat in how they function and how they move. And it's been bothering me since before Vanguard, but Vanguard is what really like where it picked up, and I'm just like that doesn't look right. And all AAA games kind of look like that now.
Hmm.
Um, the environments, they nailed it. I think the environments look really really nice. The other thing that struck me is the combat. Like I wasn't expecting it. It's basically you swap between two loadouts at any time, and you basically occupy each of your hands. I think there might be two-handed. I haven't come across a two-handed weapon outside of like a bow and arrow yet. But basically, like there's a spear, there's swords, there's multiple things of magic, which was nice. You have a wand, which basically just makes magic combat feel like physical combat because it's basically like a physical weapon just with range. And then you have books, you can find grimoires that have like 4 spells allocated to them, and it's just like very fluid. I wasn't expecting like the kind of combat, it's
The
not
combat is like an
miraculous.
overall plus in your opinion.
Yes, the combat is a big plus. So basically I was surprised by the combat. I think the game looks nice, but the third thing that really like I felt, the whole thing feels really cheap. I can't really put my finger on it. Like, it almost feels like, you know how people love to make those Unreal demos that never really go anywhere, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it almost feels like a step above that, you know?
Huh.
Like, not like vaporware or shovelware, but like, it feels very cheap. I can't quite put my finger on it. And there's a lot of people out there who are kind of scrutinizing it, like I said, unjustly. Like, there's like, even though they've said repeatedly, like, they're just like, this isn't meant to be an Elder Scrolls, people are kind of looking at it like it is their Elder Scrolls. I can't blame either side for that. It's just the unfortunate reality about it. But it's not as immersive as some people would like. Like, you can't go around and kill whoever you want. Nobody reacts if you do wanton crime. You can't really do too much crime. It's just a straightforward RPG, and that's not what some people were expecting, but that's not what I'm feeling. It just, I don't know, it feels cheap. I don't know if I'm going to end up beating it.
That leans into like the unfair scrutiny that you were talking about.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a very serviceable, like, 6 to 7. I think it would have, like, if you, like, either made it more immersive, maybe, or if you added, like, a bit more freedom. Like, I'm not the guy that's going to sit there and say, like, oh, this isn't like the Elder Scrolls, so you're bad automatically. I'm not the guy that's going to scrutinize all the small details. Those details are nice, but it's not what it's going for. But yeah, I feel like if it leaned into that a little bit, because Obsidian, nobody really knows them for their original stuff anymore, which is unfortunate. Most people know Obsidian from when they've done Bethesda-like stuff, like when they handled Fallout New Vegas all those years ago, Outer Worlds, which was their own thing. So I would just say it. I don't want to say knockoff. It just feels really cheap. I don't know if I'll end up sticking with it. But it was better than I was expecting. I really just wish it didn't have this unfortunate, like, thing cast upon it, you know, with like the ideological stuff, and now it has like all this other stuff it needs to live up to. We'll see where I end up with it. The first companion you get, the last comment I gotta have, the first companion you get is voiced by the same guy that voices Garrus, so that was neat. It's like, oh shit, it's like it's
well, you knew that already.
In a while. I didn't know that. I got there.
You didn't know that? Okay.
No, I if I did, I've forgotten it, because maybe now that you're mentioning it,
one of the biggest biggest draws for the game was that it's the same voice actor as Garrus.
If we talked about that, I'd forgotten it. Maybe we have, but no, it's just like fresh off the boat from tutorial land. I start talking to this guy. I'm like, I know you. And he even has, like, I don't know, this had to have been intentional. If it's not, it's a happy accident. But he says, it feels good to be part of a squad again. I'm like, I missed you, buddy. But yeah, so we'll see. Maybe I'll have more to say about it next week. But there were, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, there were other games I had on the list of games to play that I jumped over for Avowed. So we'll see how much longer I stick with that. But so far, 6 to 7 out of 10. Not as good as the people who love it say, and not as bad as the people who hate it say. It's just very serviceable, but because of all the stuff going on with the directors and whatnot, it's gonna be in everybody's face for a bit, for a hot second. Especially when the sales stuff comes out, because everybody right now is going like, oh, it didn't sell well, oh, it sold great, oh, we're happy with it, and looking at the Steam charts, I'm just like, it's not like a Veilguard where I can say like, oh, it's these guys are fluffing the numbers. I'm just like, let's just calm down a little bit, guys. Let's let the dust settle like last time. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I've been playing. Next week I'll have more to say, just because aside from Avowed, like I said, I'm going to get to that list of mine, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, for me, a lot of things have remained largely the same. I have dipped the toe back into Darktide just because I like the game. I wanted to play it again. Helldivers, Destiny. I tried the Delta Force Black Hawk Down campaign. Not for very long, because so apparently they created this campaign to be like this insurmountable challenge, and it is very fucking hard. It's really difficult. Like it rides the line of being like a military sim, but also like playing like a COD in a way. Or Battlefield, I guess, but with a campaign. Like there's very few HUD that you don't really see where you're being shot from. Like within less than a minute of starting the campaign, like you go into a building, you go down a flight of stairs, you kill some guys, and then over the radio it'll say, oh, there's a sniper near your position, and then like within seconds after hearing that radio transmission, I get sniped and I'm dead. And it it's a very difficult experience because they don't really telegraph where the enemies are, and part of the hook of the game is supposed to be like things are coming at you from everywhere, and you have to figure out the best route to get where you need to go. But I didn't even get past the first level just because it was. So when you first boot up the game, and
Mhm.
if you are not in a squad, the game gives you a dialogue box saying that the single player campaign is extremely challenging. It's intended to be played with a squad of 4 people. Um, are you sure you want to continue? And then you have to
Mm.
click on continue. But it's very, very difficult, and it's like in an actual military sim, if you get shot, you're either gonna die or you need to bandage up, and
Yeah.
that's essentially the same thing. And it's people have been doing like solo challenges for Black Hawk
I
Down.
bet.
Yeah, so it's like it's become a thing now, but it's very difficult, and I don't know if I'm gonna go back to it because I don't really feel like banging my head against the wall until I get past a section of a mission or just a mission in general, and nobody that I know is gonna play that with me. So
Mm.
it's whatever. So that was Delta Force. I've been playing more Mass Effect naturally. I'm still taking my sweet time with it. I'm
Yeah.
kind of going all over the place and doing everything. I started a new playthrough for Doom 2016, just in
Mm.
preparation of the Dark Ages. I'm probably gonna play through that and then Doom Eternal.
Okay.
Um, so that's been fun.
Yeah.
I have nothing bad to say about the Doom remakes. It's like one of the few series of games that I follow that got a remake done to it, and like Doom 2016 was fantastic. Doom Eternal was what was not as good, but was very, very close. And the Dark Ages seems to be another step in the correct direction, and I'm really looking forward to the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
Um, so beyond that, Helldivers, that's kind of a
Of
given.
course. Of
Destiny, kind of
course.
a given. The big thing that I've been playing this week is the closed beta for Killing Floor 3, and
Yes.
I have thoughts on this.
Well,
Um,
if you wanna roll right into that, I mean, we pretty much
yeah,
covered all the. Yeah, go for it.
yeah, that was pretty much everything that I've played, with the exception of Killing Floor, and I have
Yes.
a series of notes here.
All right.
Um,
Let's hear them.
yeah, so you know how much do you remember from Killing Floor 2?
I remember. I remember a lot of the stuff from when Killing Floor 2 was new before they started doing a lot of the changes that we've talked about. So I have a decent amount of memory of like the first year or the first year of
Okay.
2 of Killing Floor
Yeah,
2.
because they added a ton of shit after that.
Yeah, and then I just remember the last time we tried it, they had added a shit ton of stuff. We didn't get to all of it. We played on a Christmas themed map, so that should kind of give you an idea of it. Whenever they did a Christmas event that added that, that
Yeah,
was
I know what map you're
that's like
talking about. I
the
don't remember the
yeah that's
name
like
of it,
the
but
well
like you
the all you
face
well,
Krampus.
yeah, but like if you know when that map was added to the game, you kind of have my watermark as far as the content I'm familiar with.
Yeah. Yeah, they added way more stuff beyond that,
Yeah,
but
no, of
that's
course, yeah.
neither here nor there. So, okay, this game has been incredibly divisive amongst like the core fan base that really plays Killing Floor. I have a bunch of like pros and cons here. So, the specialists, the old system used to be a perk system. Like you were either SWAT, Commando, Firebug, Demolitionist, Medic. Like the list goes on.
Hmm.
But it leaned into a certain play style, and you could still buy whatever weapons from the trader, but depending on the gun, you would get like vastly increased bonuses for like an assault rifle on the commando as opposed to an assault rifle on the firebug class, or the firebug perk rather.
Hmm.
um, so they replaced the perks with specialists this time, and each
Yes.
specialist has like a throwable, a gadget, an ultimate, like what you would expect from your standard run-of-the-mill AAA first-person shooter in 2025. Now, I think this is a double-edged sword
Okay.
because, from a Killing Floor fan's perspective, like it's not really what Killing Floor is all about. But the one phrase that I'm gonna go back to a bunch in this quasi review, even though it's just a closed beta,
Yeah.
is Evolution. Like,
Okay.
I don't know how much more they could have quote unquote evolved the formula from Killing Floor 2 to 3, um, if they stuck with the perk system. I'm sure they could have done something, and I I suspect that the devs knew they were going to piss a lot of people off by incorporating specialists into this game, but they did it anyway,
Okay.
and that that is what it is. I'm okay for the most part with the specialist because it still feels for the most part like the perk system, with the exception of the supers and the gadgets that they give you that are exclusive to that specialist.
Okay.
Um, I I don't really mind the ultimate abilities so much. There are some that I think are just fucking stupid. Like the engineer, he doesn't get to deploy like a turret or something, which is what you would expect an engineer to skill to be. He like takes out these two giant like sound wave generating things, like a
Okay.
kinetic burst or whatever, and you just like shotgun blast everything in front of you, and it's just basically a win button.
It's
It's
not even
I
something you
don't
place.
no, it's
That
like
seems very
it's like
strange.
a so like he's wearing an exosuit and
Mm.
it comes out from his back and that's how he shoots. A lot of the character designs themselves seem very uninspired, but I'm not so concerned about like the art style of the game as I am with how this game plays. That's something
Okay.
else that's on my list. That I don't I think that Killing Floor 3 lacks its own art style, lacks its own
Okay.
artistic style. That's the exact words that I wrote.
All right.
Um, and that ranges anywhere from the guns to the just the way the game looks. I think maps are a different category. To like the specialists. And the one thing that I couldn't fucking stand were the voice lines for these specialists. They were god awful. Like it was the
You mean
same level.
like
Yeah,
poorly acted or no character? Like what's going on?
it's poorly acted and the writing is just abysmal. And the voice lines go off
Okay.
constantly. It was just annoying. Um, so I could do without that. I didn't really go digging into the settings as far as like if I could turn them off. I might be able to like turn up the dialogue volume, but I don't want to not hear any of the dialogue.
Yeah.
But just like the class specific voice lines to the specialists are just 95%, I don't want to hear it. Uh, so I could definitely live without that. That was like a big con in my opinion. I think the game feels fine overall. I don't think it feels any better than Killing Floor 2, but it still feels like how I would expect a Killing Floor game to play. Um, they have now vaulting and uh, you could always jump, but you couldn't slide, but the jump was like not good at all. It was kind of useless, but the jump kind of ties into the mantle system, and you could also slide now. So like people are calling it like Killing Floor Legends 3 or like because it's similar to Apex Legends. I don't really mind the movement system. It's kind of what people would expect coming from a newer shooter in this day and age. So that is kind of a non-starter for me. Like the sliding and the jumping and the like I would expect to be able to mantle over a short fence in any game. So them including it in Killing Floor is not like the end of the world for me. Um, so that's movement system is fine. It doesn't really
Okay.
matter so much in my opinion, especially because it's not a PvP game. Like you're not gonna, yeah, you're not
As
gonna
long as
like
it's
try to duke people
smooth and you're
out.
not
Yeah,
getting, hung up on
yeah,
anything, that's all that
yeah.
matters.
So that was another thing. I like the three maps that they included in the beta. I don't know how many are coming at launch, but I think they're fine. They're a little bit too bright for my liking, especially for a Killing Floor game, because like it's supposed to be this overwhelming aesthetic of horror and like disturbing imagery, and
Mhm.
you don't really get that in these maps. So, I mean, it's whatever. The best one, in my opinion, is the Horzine Factory, which is where they make all the Zeds. That one is it's dark and the Zeds are coming. Well, they come out of the walls in every map, but it's much more on theme for Killing Floor, in my opinion. Um, so that one was the best one. Um, let's see. I did voice lines, maps, specialist. The guns. they have decided to really lean into like the sci-fi aesthetic for the guns.
Yeah, that's
And this
something
is
that we've noted. Like I would say, every other time we've talked about the game is like
yeah,
a change in aesthetic in that direction.
yeah. So this is also a double-edged sword for me because I don't really mind the sci-fi aesthetic for the weapons. Um, I think that they should add like actual firearms into the game later on because Killing Floor 1 and 2 had all real-world guns, but in Killing Floor 2, as they came out with uh, more content for it, they really went like hard into the sci-fi theme, like
Hmm.
post-launch, which is fine, like whatever, because people love Killing Floor 2, so that it all comes together as a sum of its parts to make an experience that people like. And if you're gonna cherry pick like something like sci-fi guns, I think that's kind of baseless. Um, like there's an MP5 in the game. It's not called the MP5, but it like if you look at it, you're gonna know it's an MP5. There's a scar that is like if you look at it, you know it's a scar. It even says scar with like another descripting a descriptor on it,
Hmm.
but like it has like like these energy things like attached to both sides of the gun. I guess trying to make it look more futuristic-y, but it's still a scar. Like you would tell in a heartbeat, but just by looking at it, like from any other military shooter that you've ever played, you know
Yeah,
what a scar looks like.
of course.
Um, and there's very, very, very few real world guns in that vein than there are just guns that they've created from scratch for this game, and that's fine. Um, but I think that we can have the best of both worlds. If they want to make these sci-fi based weapons, then sure you can make them. But I also think that like down the road, once they start to pump out more content and support this game over the long haul,
Hmm.
I I think that, you can have both styles in the game and people would like the game more for it. So that is what it is. Um, so those were the guns. Overall optimization is my next category. Um,
Hmm.
this game is not well optimized whatsoever.
I see.
It is not a smooth experience as far as like frame rate and loading screens and buffering, pop-in. I encountered this one bug. This was really, really bad. I encountered I encountered this one bug where like I was playing as Foster, who's the commando character, and
Hmm.
he's like the OG Killing Floor character from
Yes.
years and years and years ago. He's the
Yeah.
only one that came back for Killing Floor 3, which I find shocking, but whatever. I would love to see DJ Scully make a return, but I digress. Um, so there was this bug where I had my assault rifle out as Foster, and I could ADS, shoot, reload, inspect, whatever. It was fine. Switched to my pistol, and when I ADS'd, the screen shrunk down to like a quarter of the size in the corner. All the other space was like an elongated image of what it was supposed to be, and
Oof.
it still played, but it was like I should have taken a screenshot or a clip or something because it was unplayable, like from like a gamer's perspective. Like the
Mm.
game still ran and functioned and played, but the visual distortion that I saw, and it was only ADSing this one particular pistol. If I fired from the hip, it was no problem. If I switched weapons back to my assault rifle and ADS, it was no problem. It was
Mhm.
only specifically ADSing this one type of pistol, and I couldn't fucking figure out like what I did wrong, and then I just didn't use the pistol because it was like it hurt your eyes when the visual bug would rear its ugly fucking head. So I think that this game is supposed to launch on March 25th, if I'm not mistaken, which is not a very long time from now. It's almost exactly 1 month from right now.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that Tripwire needs to maybe delay for like at least a month or 2 months or something and go through the game and iron out a bunch of bugs because that was like the worst one that I found. But there was a bunch of frame rate issues. There was a bunch of stuttering and pop-in. It played okay, like overall, but it was still very noticeable during
Mhm.
longer play sessions. And we'll see what happens because it was not the best experience for like a first impressions of a new
Oh
game
yeah.
that I played. Um, so those are generally my overall thoughts on Killing Floor. I think a
Okay.
lot of it goes back to the evolution of the game because at its core, Killing Floor is just a horde PvE shooter, and I don't know how much you would be able to innovate and evolve that formula without drastically pissing people off because it like Killing Floor is extremely niche. I was shocked that it even got a third game in the series. Um, it's extremely niche, but the people who play it love it dearly.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you're going to evolve on that formula without, at the very least, taking some calculated risks, which I think is what the specialist system is. There is crafting in the game, but the system is just as convoluted as the microtransaction system from Killing Floor 2. So I'm not even going to touch on that because I didn't fuck around with it at all.
Hmm.
Um, I okay, so let me just fast forward.
Yeah.
Um, I think the people that are hating on it are being too harsh. 'Cause I think overall the game will be fine eventually. I don't think it's in even close to a launchable state as it stands now.
Hmm.
Um, we'll see what happens in a few. They were supposed to be doing so February 27th, they're doing another live stream and showing off more of the game. So we'll see what happens then. Um, but I don't think it's in a launchable state as it stands now. I still
Ah,
had fun with it.
yeah.
Uh, like I had enough fun with it where I wouldn't pay $60 for it. I would pay 40 maybe. Um, but I also just I'm kind of biased. I really love the Killing Floor franchise. I played it since the first game was out. Um, but anyway, those are my general thoughts on Killing Floor 3 closed beta. I think Tripwire has a lot to work on, but I enjoyed my time with it overall. And I am eager to see how the game is supported post-launch because I think that is going to be what makes or breaks it.
Okay.
So
Uh,
those are my thoughts.
how far off are we from like the main release? Is this the first of many beta tests? What's going on that way?
No, this game is out on March 25th. Technically, this was the fourth closed beta test, but this was the quote unquote closed beta test for all the schmucks who signed up online. Um, they had other betas previous that the Tripwire sent out to um, private like content creators and that had to sign an NDA. This was the
Yeah,
non-NDA
that
closed
I
beta.
remember. Yeah, I remember you talking about the NDA. I just didn't know. I didn't realize we were that close to it. I keep
Yeah,
forgetting. Even though you've definitely mentioned the release date before and everything like that. I'm just with all the issues that you have with the game, the ones that can be fixed anyway, because they can't redo the art style or undo the specialist system
yeah,
or
like the
anything like
art
that.
style I could look past because that's that's whatever. That's almost a nitpick at this point.
Hmm.
I just want the game to be fun when it comes out, and I think it could be. It's just going to take some work.
If they stabilized it, like they fixed the bugs and made it run right, is that enough, or does it need changes to the core gameplay based on everything that you told me?
I would think that that is enough for now because I don't
Okay.
have as much of a problem with the specialist system as a lot of other people do.
Hmm.
I think that again, they took a risk in changing the way that Killing Floor plays at a foundational level, and I'm okay with that because it like when the Zeds are charging you, it still feels like I'm playing Killing Floor, which is the number one thing I was concerned about.
Okay.
So that that was my reservation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, fingers
So
crossed for
we'll
some
see what
fixes in the
happens.
next month.
Yeah, I'm not really like super hopeful that they're going to be able to get to all the shit that I saw, but
Mm.
if they could fix at the very least that awful visual bug that I stumbled upon,
I have a
that'll be
feeling they'll get
something.
to the obvious stuff. I can't imagine, like, even if it was like the world's smallest team, like glaring issues like that. I can't imagine them not getting to it. And that's
Yeah.
also considering whether or not like how old the beta is. Because you could be
Yeah, I have no
playing
idea how
like
old this build is.
you could potentially be playing the same exact build that the NDA guys had a while ago.
Yeah,
So it's just like you're dealing with an
possible.
older build. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. I think but yeah, I think that the negatives of this game so far are like really glaring that
Hmm.
they are outweighing the positives, even though, in my opinion, there are more positives than there are negatives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get you.
Okay. Yeah. So that's going to be a hurdle this game needs to overcome.
Mm.
And I hope they don't include that god awful microtransaction shop where you need a PhD to fucking understand it.
Mm.
Um,
We'll see what
oh,
happens there.
oh, there's a season pass because what game wouldn't be complete without a
Oh, of
season pass
course.
in today's
Of
day and
course.
age? Um, I understand why people are calling this like AAA slop. I get it. I really do. Um, but it also doesn't mean that it's not fun at the same time. So there's that.
Mm.
Um, anyway, I rambled enough about Killing Floor.
Fair enough.
Let's move on to something else.
All right.
You go. I've talked for a long time now. You go.
Well, there's a couple small things. There's something that we never got to like a couple weeks ago, and I don't think we talked about it at all at any point. You know, GOG, right?
Yeah.
Good old gaming. Have you kept up with their new Dreamlist initiative?
Is that the game preservation initiative that they are doing?
Yeah, so basically they had like a community wish list, right? And it was
Yep.
just like kind of like the back part of their website where people discuss and upvote things. Now they're doing what's called the Dream List. I talked about this on Newshole a couple weeks ago. And basically what it is it's literally any game you just vote for, right?
Okay.
And it's supposed, and the big pull is like, aside from just voting for it, you can write your own testimonials, your own stories, your own experiences with the game, basically, you know, to stand by and kind of like garner support, right? And there's been
Yep.
a few outstanding, it's interesting to me because there's a few outstanding stories there where they're just like, oh, some niche Digimon game is like getting all this support, and they opened this up with ports of Dino Crisis, you know, that's available, you know, modern ports on the PC. Because for anyone who doesn't know, and this includes you, the whole draw of GOG is that aside from the fact that it's DRM free, right? You get launchers that you can install and do whatever you want with, right? The big thing is that for as long as they're around, their commitment is to make sure that as computers get updated and software is improved, they patch it so that it just functions. It just works. You don't have to worry about community patches and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see a lot of these niche games, you know, get pushed to the forefront. But what I found interesting is, and based on what their communication with everybody has been so far, it's games that haven't gotten PC ports are on that list, I've noticed, and a lot of them are gaining like traction. And like Silent Hill 1, it is exclusive to the PlayStation 1. You can get it on PlayStation Classics, on PS3 and PS TV, and I think the Vita. Yeah, the Vita and the TV use the same system, so I think that's the case. But the whole point is like, I'm just like, so if that gets enough votes, are they going to go to Konami and start rallying for a PC port? And that's what it seems like. And they've basically been tweeting is like, hey, we hear you about this and this and this, and like all these different games have been basically rallied behind. And I also I looked through the Dream List. A lot of them have been added to the store already. So I'm just like, okay, so they're making progress. So my whole thing is, I guess I was curious to see if you'd heard anything about it, but also the fact that they seem to be willing to go the extra mile to like request new ports of games that have never gotten them before. And also there's some weird examples like Breath of Fire, which is an RPG series by Capcom, was never released in the US. So it's like, oh, they would need to relocalize it or translate it or just port the European version over. So there's like, it looks like they're willing to at least walk up to the hurdle that some of these games are going to, instead of, and even if they don't jump over it. So I don't know if you had heard anything or.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't really keep up to date with the GOG like
Yeah.
initiatives or whatever you would want to call them. I mean, I did take note when they announced their game preservation program. I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
But GOG's problem is that Steam exists. Nobody
Everybody's
wants to
problem is
use
Steam
a
exists.
yeah, nobody
But-
wants to use a different PC launcher.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing about GOG that, I mean, just recently, or not recently, but it wasn't they didn't launch with it, right? GOG didn't really have a browser that you needed to download, and even now you don't have to. They have one now because like people asked for it, but it's not mandatory for their storefront. The whole thing with GOG is that you buy it and they give you the launcher and the installer, and that's brilliant in my mind. It's DRM free. You just do whatever you want. That's fogies like me like having the files that you can just install at any point. I don't, it's not as convenient as Steam, even though you can link the two together, but I know how to go through my files. I know how to do shortcuts. People should know how to do that. But it is interesting that you say that, because they added their own now. It actually makes me think of the different competitors to Steam and the different initiatives, because GOG is in its own lane. Its focus is preservation and making sure the games work, because there are games on Steam that you can own, right? And yep. They just won't run. Steam is typically pretty good at like adding warnings and disclaimers. Like just recently they added like, oh, this game's been in early access for a while with no updates. Oh, this game, you're not allowed, like they made it so that there's warnings if games have built-in ads and stuff. They're good with things like that. But one of the things I noticed is they don't really have like a compatibility like warning, right? Like I wanted to play the other week with Luke. I was like, oh, let's play a random game, and I'm just like, I wanted to throw him into the original Red Faction just to see how he would react, right? And see if we could get anywhere with it. Fucking thing doesn't run unless you have a community patch. Like, you got to go out of the way to do it. Now, if you went and bought it on GOG, I don't know if it's on there, but I'm just using that as an example, it would just function, because their whole shtick is built to work with modern platforms always, and they'll update it as they go along. That's their whole preservation thing. Meanwhile, like, everybody else has like I feel like GOG is like the only storefront that really exists alongside Steam, because they offer something unique. Epic Games is only still in the game because they have the fuck you money to remain in the game, right? They try to give out free games every month for people who use the platform. Amazon recently, I don't know how recent, but one of the guys who's trying to do Amazon's storefront, right, said, we threw as much fucking money as we could. We could not destabilize Steam. I'm just like, well, that's the wrong thing right off the bat. You're never gonna. It would take multiple deaths within the company to basically make it like vulnerable. Like, yeah. That's why people worry, like, when Gabe finally bites the fucking dust, like, what's gonna happen to Steam and all that, because like,
he's definitely got a contingency. I don't believe for a second that there is no successor in place.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Like, and people have pointed out, things about his son. Maybe his son will take over, but I don't know. But where was I going with this? Oh yeah, basically, like, it just goes to show, like, you basically can't have a storefront outside of Steam unless you have something to offer. And that actually goes back to a quote by Gabe where he says it's like a service issue. That was his whole thing with, like, when people talked about piracy, is like, if people are going out of the way to pirate the games, it's a service issue. That's piracy. I'm just like, it makes perfect sense. That's why GOG still exists alongside Steam, and other things are kind of floundering. Like, I don't even know why Battle.net has its own launcher anymore, if I'm being honest, because it's like 3 layers deep. The only reason Xbox has a PC launcher is because they make Windows, So, and it's actually funny. The last thing I'll really say about this whole storefront nonsense is, as a kind of a side thing, The Sims, that classic game, right?
Yeah.
For the longest time, 1 and 2 had been abandoned. Essentially, they were abandonware for a while, right? And they're actually up on the GOG, so there's still a chance there. But out of the blue, EA, who I guess they were just, their origin is not, they're just like, oh fuck it, we're gonna put it on Steam. They uploaded, or they readied for sale Sims Complete bundles, right? It's like, oh, that's neat. The games aren't abandonware anymore. I mean, it's kind of easier for me to get it as it is abandonware, just because, if you know what you're doing, you can get The Sims. But I'm like, that's neat. Turns out they, like, retroactively bundled it with The Sims 4. So, like, if you buy this standalone bundle and you just decide, I want to return it, it'll tie in with your Sims 4 playtime, and you won't be able to return it.
Oh my god.
It's just more EA.
That's fucking shady as fuck.
That is incredibly shady. I'm surprised they got away with it, but... yeah, that's all I have to ramble about when it comes to storefronts and preservation and things like that.
Yeah,
so,
there's definitely more to be said, but
I mean, how much do you really want to dig into the multiple failed attempts? Really,
not that much.
Exactly.
All right, well, let's see what's another small
What
thing
else
that
you
we
got?
got.
Yeah, what you got?
But going back to the Delta Force Black Hawk Down thing, the the campaign was supposed to be like a premium paid experience. I
Yeah.
think it was supposed to be like $40 or something at least.
Mm-hmm.
But at the last second, like 2 days before the game launched,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Team Jade or the Teamy Group, whoever sets the prices for this stuff, were like, no, we're actually going to do this for free. They just released it for free. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Like you,
sweet.
like they had the option of charging a premium price tag for it, but then they didn't. So interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
that is pretty cool.
yeah. Take what you can get.
Um, Dune Awakening got a launch date and a price, and a new trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Comes out on May 20th. It's going to cost $50. I am mildly interested in this, which is the only reason why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah.
Um, I really loved both Dune movies, and I read the first two books, and the first one was excellent. Second one was more of like an epilogue, but that's relevant to this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, but yeah, I'm mildly interested in the game. It's supposed to be a MMO, so and I don't really have a great track record with MMOs, so we'll see how that goes. Um, uh, let's see what else. I have a Doom the Dark Ages article in here for some reason. I feel like we talked about that already though last week.
What was it?
Um, Doom the Dark Ages features the largest spaces we've ever made, but id Software knows you don't want to spend 2 hours in a single level.
It
Did we
sounds
talk
like
about that
something we
already?
talked about, but I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast.
I don't know. It's cool. I love the Doom games, so a bigger level is cool, but yeah, definitely don't want to spend 2 hours on a single level.
Of
So
course.
there's that. I mean, I don't really have anything like overwhelming for this. The biggest thing that I wanted to talk about was Killing Floor because
Okay.
that's like a new game that's coming out that I'm looking forward
Yeah,
to.
that's fair.
Everything else I have is pretty much on the smaller slash trivial end of
Mm.
things. So
There's
if you have
a-
something, then shoot.
I got another small thing to add to your pile. With the Switch 2 right around the corner, Nintendo canned yet another rewards member thing. There's like they called it, was it My Nintendo Points, My Nintendo Gold or something, and it's
Okay.
basically like every purchase you make, you could register your games. If you bought a digital, it would happen automatically, and they're just shit canning that. Just like you can't save nickels on your Nintendo product anymore because then I thought that was funny. Just like every single like reward or club that they've ever done, they end up just like, it's almost like they treat it like console generations where they eventually just close the doors or say you're getting too much out of it or something like that. So I guess
Yeah.
going into the Switch, not that I'm saying like Nintendo would like have altruistic reasons or any reason to really not take savings from you, but I guess with the Switch 2 on the horizon, they're just closing the door on shit like that. So that was kind of funny to me.
Yeah.
There's
What?
another thing.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you something. Have you ever purchased from limited run games?
I have never bought from them, although I have wanted to. The biggest thing that I was interested in was the Jack and Daxter or the Jack 2 limited edition one, but I never got the chance to actually purchase it.
Was that the one I managed to get my hands on? I can't remember.
I think so.
Okay, because
You
my
you
own-
actually have it in your possession?
I have this big box because they did them one after another, right? They did the Precursor Legacy Jack 2 and Jack 3, and it's just this massive collector's edition kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, because the main reason I'm confused about this is because I legitimately don't remember what storefront I bought it from. It was like a couple hundred, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was very, very, very low uh, physical copies or runs. I don't know what you would call it.
Hold on, let me check this out. Limited run. Oh yeah, this is what I got. I have the Jack 2 version because I remember we were both eyeing this when it was coming out, and I said, oh yeah, they only did like 200 of each.
It went really quick too.
Yeah,
I remember correctly.
they weren't that expensive. They were under $100, but they were near $100. Okay, so basically,
That's it? Really?
yeah, it was 80.
What an idiot! I should have bought that.
$85. I think you. Here's the thing. I think you were, just to digress into our own little story. I'm pretty sure you. It's not that you didn't want to. It's that you couldn't justify it that day, and by the time you had the money to spend on it, the moment had passed. It was within the week. It's just they went really quickly.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, they went really quickly. Yeah, I have.
I'm on their website right now. They have a Doom Eternal Phobos helmet.
They also. I didn't realize,
that's fucking cool.
I didn't realize they did Jack X. Huh, that would have been interesting to have.
Of all games, wait.
Jack
so
X?
Jack 3 wasn't.
No, they have.
a part of
they
it?
did. They did all 4 of the PlayStation 2 Jack and Daxter games.
Oh, okay.
No Lost Frontiers though. That would have been the time to do it. Anyway, what I'm getting at, after we just gushed a little bit over these neat collector's editions, they have a pretty bad history of low quality products for things that aren't on current platforms or when they're porting things over. Like they did a kick a while ago where they were basically reissuing and reporting games for like old CD based consoles, like the CDO and the CDO, the 3DO and the Amiga Sega 32, all these old CD based consoles when CDs were new for video games, right? And they got a lot of flack because back then it turns out they were like hand printing these games. They weren't like professionally pressing them. They were just burning them on like whatever PC they had laying around the office for these massive meme collector's editions of games like Night Trap and Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, shit that you only know about for like memes and like because funny YouTube man at one point played them and it made you laugh. But recently they reissued NES games, right? And apparently the capacitors they used or something, I forget exactly which part of it was scuffed, but it's killing consoles.
Oh no.
Basically, yeah, and it just kind of brings to light limited run games is like we just got done talking about Good Old Gaming and how they work on software preservation. Limited run games is dog shit is like the complete opposite, because a lot of their reissues are very cheap unless it's like meant for like the modern day stuff. Like for example, like we talked about the Jack and Daxter stuff. That's because there were ports to the PlayStation 4, so it's okay, we just get I don't even know if the game's in there. Maybe it's just a box and a digital code in there, but the whole point is that was a native port. When it comes to handling stuff that is either that needs to be reprinted from an older console, or if it's a reproduction cartridge and things like that, they are just terrible with reproduction, they are terrible with preservation, and it's just like, the unfortunate thing is they are the only ones doing that sort of work for like physical releases of old media. So that sector's kind of in a bad spot. They were also a big funder of the Clock Tower remake, which is terrible. Where they kind of like, you know how I am when it comes to tone and things like that. It's like they kind of animified the whole game. It's like this classic pixelated horror game. It's one of the classics. It's not like a grandfather like an Alone in the Dark or something, but it's back in that time when survival horror was kind of figuring itself out, and it was like grafted onto things like RPGs or point and clicks, and that's what Clock Tower comes from, and it really deserved better. You got YouTubers doing voice acting for it, and it's all in service of like this shitty remake, and it's tethered directly to one of the worst but one of the only physical media for old and niche games. So I'm just, I just hope that these things keep adding up and eventually they're just fucking gone, or they have some competition.
Well, you know what this means?
What?
We should start our own competitor limited run games.
Dan, that's like the third thing on the list that we got to do ourselves. Like first we got to start developing and publishing our own games. Then we need to start doing our own community events, and then we got to go back into preservation. I'm willing to do it, but goddamn, I'm gonna be at this for a long fucking time.
Yeah, like until you die.
Listen. That's not a bad. I want to work until I die, personally. As long as it's something I care about, I'll do it. But it's just, man, what a daunting task. The website's not even up yet. You're telling me to fucking do fucking reproductions on older
Didn't say it
games and
wasn't gonna help.
remakes? You're the best. But I guess the long and short of it is that my patience with limited run is growing thin, and they keep justifying it like every other month. Like they can't even they couldn't even fucking remake, they couldn't even reproduce this fucking Rugrats game for the NES for meme purchases, and they couldn't even do that right, you know. And they're killing people's consoles. It's just, please, someone else step up, because I've got shit I gotta do before I get to this point.
Oh man. All right. Well, moving on. Yeah,
before
moving
I start
on from
screaming
it.
about
So
limited run.
it's two other small things that I want to get out of the way. The first is we already did we talk about the God of War remaster for the 20th anniversary?
I think we tossed around articles to each other about rumors, but I don't think we directly talked about it. No.
Yeah. Well, it's just that it's a rumor that they're supposed to be remastering the first three God of War games. For I would assume only PlayStation.
Of course.
Maybe PC. That'd be pretty
yeah.
cool. Yeah. For the 20th anniversary of the first game being out. I don't know what date that is, but I don't know. That would be cool. I haven't played the original God of War games in quite some time. So that's pretty neat. The other thing,
yeah. The God of War games are, like, I don't want to say they're special to me, but I would very much like to see them handled with care for like a new remaster series. I think God of War was one of my earliest action games, up there with Devil May Cry, because I got them around the same time. Right. Even though, like, I think, when the fuck did Devil May Cry 1 come to the States? I can't remember. But anyway, there's been talk about remakes or potential remasters of the God of War games for a while, but it's just like, we're not out of these modern times yet where I trust them with that. I think they would change too much, honestly. I kind of don't want that to happen.
Well, we'll see. It's gonna happen if it happens. So
plus, I just want to say another thing that annoys me, just before you get to your news again, is all these people are just like, oh man, we're going back to the Greek saga. I'm like, motherfuckers, we just left it. Like, give me some goddamn air. Let's hit Egypt before we start talking about going back to Greek. Just damn. But no, yeah, it would. I do like the God of War games more than I give it credit for. 1 and 2 are classics. I enjoyed 3 for what it was. And they were, when I got a PlayStation 3 for the first time, that little neat bundle of like the PlayStation 2 games and the PSP games and the red controller all in one package. One of the first things I bought for my PlayStation 3 when I got my own. So
that's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. All right, well, the last thing that I wanted to get to is you've heard of the game Sifu?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
I played a little bit.
For anyone who doesn't know, Sifu is a third-person martial arts fighting game that you just like go through. What?
It's not a fighting game.
Action game?
It's an action game.
Okay, fine.
It's
third person.
I had to make that distinction because it's not you. It's the fact that it's advertised as a fighting game, not by the developers, but by like the storefronts. Like if you go to search for fighting games and I'm looking for like a Street Fighter, Sifu comes up in my face, and that bothers me. Just go ahead.
Okay. Well,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Sifu is a third-person action game where you fight through like a whole gang to get to I think it's your father's killer.
Yes.
But the whole shtick of the game is that if you die, you can come back as like an older version of yourself with more experience, and you're just better. It's kind of like little roguelite-y.
It is, but it's distinct enough because there's like little trade-offs. It's like you can come back older with more skills, but I think your vitality and some of your stats are lower.
Something like that.
When I played it, I did like no death. I wanted to do a clean no death run, so I never really experimented with that.
Anyway, so the reason I'm bringing this up is because the guy who directed the first, not the first, but just the John Wick movies, Chad Stahelski, I think his name is, he is in the works to make a Sifu movie for Netflix. Now, I love the John Wick movies, and if there was any game to cherry pick, for this director to make a game into a movie adaptation, it would definitely be Sifu. So I'm actually really glad that is happening. I don't know enough about the lore of the game and what makes like Sifu aside from the fact that like, oh, if you get killed, you can come back as an older version of yourself, but with
Yes.
some trade-offs. But purely from like a popcorn bucket movie experience, this is cool.
Yes.
I am curious to see like a proof of
Yeah.
concept or whatever.
So my take on it, just as someone who's not really attached to Sifu but has played it, I do think it's one of those games which is very light in how it tells its story. There's not a whole lot of exposition dumped at you like every time the story shifts or you go to a new place. It's very much give you your objective, go do it, and then there's like light spatterings of story in between, but it's very quietly told. It's one of those games that likes to show more than it tells, right?
Right.
And I think that the story in itself is bare bones enough where it's less likely to get fucked up by an adaptation. When it comes to that popcorn factor that you mentioned, I think honestly, like that is acceptable for something like a Sifu where it's lighter on the story. It's about like your combat and how you can do that. I think that's a good setup, basically, like between this director and this property. That being said, I don't want to be that guy and say like, oh, just throw anything at me. Like, you still got to respect the lore a little bit. I think, just even thinking about it, like with how much leeway you have with a property like Sifu, I think that you could do a lot of interesting things. Keep it quieter. Don't do the movie kind of like tropes and stuff like that. You could even do like a cheeky thing in the middle where like to kind of as you're going through, because the whole game is like you're going and you're working your way through a network of criminals, right? You could even
Yep.
have like get the first two done but subvert everybody's expectations by having the main character fail at one of them, and then in the movie he comes back older. You could do some clever things, basically, is what I'm saying. Is there's enough, or I should say there's little enough there where you can experiment and have fun with the concept. That being said, I'm not going to say it's a slam dunk. None of these fucking things ever are, but as somebody who's just kind of looking at it for what it is, I think that this is one of those setups that could work in the property's favor. I think it's going to be hard for that kind of combo to fuck up, basically, but stranger things have happened.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was just an interesting
Yeah.
creative choice to pair that director with this franchise. So
It
I'm
sounds like
interested.
could work.
Yeah. But
Um
that's it. That's all I got.
So yeah, I mean, I have we probably get to at least one of these things here. The last thing I want to kind of point out, just because it's something that we've talked about a little bit week over week, and there's a lot of things that go into it. Is I'm sure you heard that NetEase laid off its U.S. based guys. You hear
Yeah.
about that? Yeah, and everybody was kind of up in arms about it for a while, and obviously the developers were making a stink about it. It's like there's two takeaways from this. Number one, the U.S. guys weren't integral to the process at all. I'm honestly a little surprised that they even had guys in the U.S. work on it when it was such a small team compared to the main team in China that's working on it, right? It doesn't affect their communications with Marvel. That was an entirely different setup. So I don't know what these guys were doing for them to be laid off in the first place, But the game is going to continue as normal. They were not important to the process. I'm sure they added something at some point, but they were not necessary. It's a reorganizing thing. I say that makes sense, honestly. It's something that makes me reevaluate why, you have all these companies that have studios across the world, right? There are very few scenarios where that pays off for a single project, right? It's got to be a situation like we've talked about with, Battlefield, where there's different parts of the game are being worked on by different studios, right? That makes sense. You can kind of do that for what that is if you wanted to do it that way. Or if you have a situation where you have different studios across the globe working on different projects, so you can kind of, handle large catalogs of IPs. Like, that makes sense. But having a core team in China and then like a small team of 6 in the United States, like, what are you doing there, right? I think about like some of the best projects that I've experienced in my lifetime. One of my favorites, Final Fantasy IX, as an example, right? There was a team in the US and a team in Japan. You know what they did? They opened up and rented spaces in Hawaii as a midpoint between the two the two different segments of the company, and they went to Hawaii and they worked on the fucking game. There was none of this global, passing back and forth. It didn't make sense, So that's just, one part of it is like, I don't know, like everybody's up in arms because people like to get up in arms about layoffs in general, just because it's an easy thing to like have, kind of virtue signal about, where people are just like, oh, these guys were working, they had a job, and now they don't, and isn't that sad, But the second thing, and the more important thing, and the reason I brought this up is because this kind of layoff is just one of many in a kind of cultural turning. And I don't mean the layoffs, because we've talked week over week about layoffs and how, our opinions on that, right? I just mean China is obviously, as we've talked about, they're getting bigger and bigger and they're doing more projects and they're selling, right? But recently, what they've been doing to both the United States and Japan is they've been pulling funding, they've been pulling deadlines, they've been basically retracting their investments from Western studios and Japanese studios, and are becoming more independent in what they're willing to do. And I think that's going to shock a lot of studios in the US and in Japan, because there's like this weird period in between China doing their own thing and now where like they would invest and like work with companies abroad, and I'm just like, oh, that's very strange. And you'd have talent bleed that would go and do their own studios, and then they'd get a shit ton of Chinese funding and a shit ton of directive from Chinese companies, and now they're getting rug pulled essentially, and it's gonna shake things up in both regions, I think. And I would say like, oh, just go back to doing your own thing, but at the same time, these companies in these regions have spent like the last 10 years kneecapping their creative intent and who they're beholden to. So it's going to be interesting to see, because now we've talked China's on the rise, but now as they're raising their endeavors in gaming, and they're being more they're being more aggressive with their pushes into entertainment, now they're no longer playing nice with a lot of studios that they had their fingers in across the globe. So it's gonna be an interesting time for those particular companies. I really want to see, because there's some big names for niche properties in Japan in particular, where a lot of them would leave companies like, I would leave the big name that would leave Konami or Capcom, and they'd go do their own studio, and a large chunk of their funding was from China, and now they're just kind of like shit out of luck. So I'm like, how are these guys going to rebound? Where are they going to go from here? Because like we've said it before, just from the content itself, China's kind of kicking everyone's asses, so now it's it's like full on war essentially. So that's all. And I guess part of it is because of how important it is, but the other part is I just want to say I have no sympathy for the guys that got laid off. I can't imagine, it's like the whining, the incessant whining. I'm just so sick of it. I'm just like, dude, you were like, you should like, I couldn't rest in a position like that where I'm just like, I'm kind of helping with a project across the planet with my small team of 6. Like I just have it's almost like a government job where you're just going for the paycheck, and the fact that you can like
Netties, so yeah.
But you know what I mean. Like, it's like, oh, I got a job in records, and what you do is you go down with your console and you just play video games for like 7 out of your 8-hour shift, and then you have a 45-minute break and 15 minutes of work. It's like eventually like somebody's gonna, like when somebody looks in your direction, they're gonna realize they could do without you, It's like, I don't know, like there's a lot of people like that across the world in multiple industries, but in gaming there's a wake-up call coming, and there's going to be little sympathy when that happens, and they're going to keep finding out, because it's like a smaller story. Did you hear about like an ex-BioWare guy was just like, gamers need to stop being so comfortable like being gleeful about layoffs? You hear about that? And I'm just like, who the fuck are you appealing to? Because everybody is so sick of all the shit that we've been dealing with for 10 years. It's just been a rolling
time.
bowl of shit, man. And it's just like, people are tired. And, it's just, things got to change. I think we're in that period of change. But I want there to be, that we got to get to that light at the end of the tunnel we keep talking about. Like right now, like we talked about it at the beginning when we started podcasting in, things were bleak. Now things are changing, but now it's about changing in the right way. and
Right.
with China, like to kind of wrap things up, with China officially saying we're gonna do our own thing, we're gonna kick everybody's asses. We need to like hit that rallying point. We got to stop kneecapping ourselves, and we got to start doing the right thing.
We shall see.
We shall see.
We shall see.
Yep.
I think that about does it, though.
That wraps it up.
Yeah. Well, that was nothing like going out on an Anthony rant. That was episode 44 of the Pregame
Yes,
Network
it was.
podcast. Yeah. So, hope everyone enjoyed, and we will be back again next week.
Yes, we will.
Okay. Bye.
Get out.